So my name is Surya Dev. I'm the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Development. And at the outset, I would like to thank the co-organizers sitting on my both sides, the representative of AICHR Thailand on my left and AICHR Malaysia on my right. So this session is co-organized by my mandate and in collaboration with the two AICHR representatives, and so my great pleasure to do that. As you will see, the title of this session is focusing on the connections between climate change and sustainable development, and how do we translate the policies and principles into practice. That's why paper to practice, that is the context. So as you may recall, yesterday in this room we had discussion about the two declarations that the ASEAN is going to adopt hopefully next month. And then we have the two advisory opinions, of one of the International Court of Justice and the second of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. So how do we connect those dots, and what should change for governments and businesses in this particular part of the world? So that is the focus. Now the format of this event, or the session I should say, is going to be slightly different. We're going to use all of you because there's a lot of expertise in the room. So instead of having long presentations, we will try to involve all of you in this particular session. So it's more likely to be a roundtable format in which the colleagues here will provide some reflections as lead discussant on some of the issues that I'm going to do, but please get ready with the contribution from your side as well. But before we go to your contributions, let me introduce a very distinguished group of these lead discussants. On my immediate right is His Excellency Edmund Bon Tai Sun, who is the current chair and the AICHR representative of Malaysia. So Edmund, thank you for being here. On my immediate left is His Excellency Bhanubhatra Jitang. He is the AICHR representative of Thailand. Thank you, Khan, for joining. On the extreme left is Dr. Georgina Lloyd. She is the Regional Coordinator for Environmental Law and Governance for UN Environmental Program, UNEP. Extreme right is Ms. Joan Carling. She is the Executive Director of Indigenous Peoples Rights International. Thank you, Joan, for coming. Last but not least, we have Pratna, which is sandwiched there. Pratna Rao, the Program Manager of Business and Human Rights for Forum Asia. So thank you everyone for joining. So can we start with the first question for the Mentimeter, please? So you see the question, and I will encourage you to use the QR code and please respond to that question as we go along. And that will be the starting point for this session. As I mentioned to you, the idea is to involve all of you in this discussion so that we can try to understand what the perspectives are. So we're already getting some responses, but let's give it a little bit more time, maybe 30 seconds more. The people who are entering the room now, please bring out your smartphones. You are expected to participate. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. So that is what we are looking at. So the question, just for the interest of everyone in this room, is that do you see a conflict between right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and the right to development? And the question is intentionally framed because of what we keep hearing on the ground, but it is also because ASEAN is going to adopt these two declarations. So I think that is something for us to reflect. If there is a conflict, how do we resolve this? What is the way forward? How do we build that synergy on the ground in these particular situations? All right, so I'm going to give it 30 more seconds. So if you have not yet voted, please quickly vote. Then the poll is going to end. And the people who are coming into the room, can you please quickly take your mobile phone out, scan the QR code, and cast your vote. In the meantime, I think we have early indications, and I think yes is the leading in terms of vote. We have some no's, but in some cases. So if we combine yes and in some cases together, my feeling is that will be close to 2/3 or more percentage. We'll find out the percentage once we close the poll. But that looks quite significant. So I think that is my starting point. So I want the lead discussant to reflect on what we are hearing in this particular room, on this particular poll. So maybe I'll start with Edmund, you, because you are leading this process. So any quick reactions? You can be very brief, but any quick reactions that you see, what you hear from the participants in this room? Thank you.
For me personally, and I think some of the responses resonate, is that the understanding of right to development is still quite low, even among us, and perhaps that can be a discussion topic, and how the development, because environment and sustainable environment is probably a subset of one part of the elements of the right to development. So I just want to leave it there, because for me, I think even at the Commission, trying to get that explained and get that a bit deeper is not intuitive for a lot of us.
Yeah. So if I can pick from you, Edmund, what you're suggesting is that unless we have an informed understanding of what is right to development, normatively sound, we cannot answer this question in an informed manner, right? I think that's what you're trying to hint, I guess. Khan, do you want to reflect on this, and then we'll come to other participants?
Thank you, Surya, and good afternoon. I'm confused whether it's good morning or good afternoon. It's good afternoon, so good to be here. Just going to be a short reflections. I think that based on what Edmund has been saying is that I have to continue carrying these documents because of in ASEAN Human Rights Declarations. There's something really interesting is that there was a whole chunk of part related to the right to developments, and then that's in Article 35 and 36. But what is really interesting is that based on the reflection here, in these particular declarations, even though of course it has a lot of problems as we noticed, but when we refer to the right to clean, healthy, and in the context of ASEAN now, it's going to be right to safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, it's actually draw a lot also from the materials in right to development, so to speak, because of if you look into the right to developments, when we reference the particular article in this particular declarations, apart from Article 28F, we actually also quoted Article 35 and 36. And 35, actually, there are parts that talk about this. Let me read it. The right to development should be fulfilled so as to meet equitably the developmental and environmental needs of present and future generations. For example, this is one of the things that is written here. And then the second one is on Article 36. It also say that, and that will be reflecting within the declarations on right to safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as well, that say ASEAN member states should adopt meaningful, people-oriented, and gender-responsive development programs aimed at poverty alleviations, the creation of conditions including the protection and sustainabilities of the environment for the people of ASEAN to enjoy all human rights recognized in these declarations. So I think those two parts in the right to development portion of this particular declaration is really interesting because that's the entry point that really connect right to safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment together with right to development there. So that's my immediate reflection.
Okay, no, that's very good. So thank you for making a reference to the text, because then it's not you saying something, rather the text is saying something, and it is trying to make that connection between development and environment together, right? And of course, the context of this question is that human rights do come in conflict. So it's not merely about these two human rights. So they could be a tension, but then international human rights law provides a way how to resolve that conflict, right? So that is there. All right, so John, maybe you have something quick to reflect.
Yes, for me, there should be no conflict. In fact, the right to development should be guided by the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And from the indigenous peoples, we've always been already the embodiment of sustainable development through our stewardship of nature. And that it makes it sustainable in a way that we use nature to ensure that there is an intergenerational survival of humanity. So it should not be for it, that the interpretation of development now is more about economic growth, of infrastructures, and not about people. But when you add the element of right to healthy environment, that also centers the people. It gives also the social dimension on what right to development should be.
Thank you. And I think you made a very interesting point that indigenous people perhaps don't see that contradiction, because for them, people and nature, environment are the same. So they're not separate, right? So anything you do, it has to coexist with the nature. So coexistence is a key component of that harmony, right? Thank you very much for that. Georgie, and then Pratna.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we need to think both in theory and practice. Because in theory, as Khan has referenced, the language of the right to development often places developmental and environmental needs together. And exactly that text that you referenced from the ASEAN Declaration draws from the Rio Declaration, which provides that the right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet the developmental and the environmental needs of the present and future generations. But what about in practice? The problem is that in practice, the right to development is not interpreted in the lens of sustainable development, when indeed, in theory, it should be, and it is. And so this is where perhaps some of these responses from the room are coming from. They're coming from not so much of what should be, as Joanne very rightly said, but perhaps what is.
And that's a very good point, and that is the title of the session, From Paper to Practice, and I think thank you for highlighting that distinction. Pratna.
Yeah, and I think just to add, the reflections here are very telling, because I think instinctively there are people who think that the environment has its inherent rights, and only when we respect those rights can we actually develop. And then there are people that think that the environment is something that is secondary, and if it comes in the way of development, then it's something that can be sacrificed to a certain extent. So I think the fact, we know that theoretically the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is almost a prerequisite for the right to development. But the fact that these answers show that people do think, majority, that there is conflict between the two, somewhere it indicates that we're going wrong in the way development is being done. And the environment isn't being respected in the way that it should, in the way that it has inherent rights. So I think it also depends on who you ask what development means and what the conflict entails, because I think different stakeholders will have very different interpretations for whether there is conflict or whether there isn't conflict. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I think these are very important and very honest, candid reflections from the panelists, and I think hopefully you can relate to those reflections. Edmund mentioned about the low level of awareness, what the right to development in terms of what it means and entails. So I developed this leaflet, so please collect it at the end of the session. We'll get it distributed. But let's move on to the next question. And again, that question is going to invite your participation. Can we get the second question, please, from the mentee? So please bring out your smartphones. Oh, they already voted? Oh, okay. So people are running ahead of the show. Okay. All right. Okay. Because I was. So people have already answered 3 questions. So you are all right. So, but let's still give a little bit more time. So the question that I wanted to ask is that what is the biggest barrier to effective climate action in ASEAN? And so this cloud is emerging and a variety of things are going to pop up. So instead of the panelist or the lead discussant that I have, instead of they preparing their remarks beforehand, they have to react to this. So that's why this session is different. That's why you're involved. We are merely sitting here, but you are at par with these people sitting close to me, right? So I suggest we start going because we already see some trends. Corruption is coming quite heavily, political will, non-interference, political will and lack of political will. So maybe we can combine the two: lack of information, lack of knowledge, personal interest. So that could be perhaps issues about corporate capture there. So variety of issues. So maybe we start from left to right. Georgie, if you don't mind, do you want to reflect on this? So from your perspective as UNEP, do you relate to what you see here, or you have any different challenge? So how would you like to react, and how could we overcome one or two of these challenges from your perspective? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Surya. We did have a little bit of an advantage in that we knew the question that would be asked. So I did go back and I spoke to my climate team in the office to find out also their perspectives on this question, because just last week there was the NDC 3.0 regional workshops, and a lot of work, of course, has been focused around the submission of the enhanced updated nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. And I do, recognize some of these responses, because one of the significant issues is the major implementation gap between policies on paper and what is achieved on the ground. But we have to look at why is that implementation gap? What is driving that implementation gap? And some of the points here have been raised. Political will has been raised, ambition, the need for strong will across government agencies, including particularly through finance. One example that was given to me by a colleague is through energy efficiency standards. They're very typically weak across the region. There's also something that perhaps hasn't come up so much here, but the need for regulatory reform. Often the regulatory system does not enable climate action that would move towards renewables, for example. So you've got regulatory frameworks that are outdated and that are very much biased towards fossil fuel production and don't allow for the integration of new markets for renewables. I mentioned finance. Capacity does come up a bit here as well, lack of knowledge, which is across both government and private sector, that there needs to be greater capacity. But one of the biggest issues is that implementation gap. And you referenced, Surya, some of the advisory opinions that have come out, and we're likely to see, as a result of the International Court of Justice advisory opinion, some stronger actions by states. I mean, it's in and of itself not legally binding. That needs to be clearly stated, but it will influence what happens at the national level, particularly in the findings of state obligations to prevent environmental harm and the need for states to take direct action in this regard.
Thank you, excellent. And thank you also for trying to be brief, because that is the whole idea. So Pratna again, and if you can be brief.
Sure.
Anything, Pratna, you want to pick? And
I think I'll pick the lack of political will, because I think for me, the way I see it is, I think political will exists as long as it doesn't interfere with the bottom line, and that is profit and economic growth. So I think the political will starts getting lower and lower when climate is brought up, and the issue of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, when it starts interfering with the GDP, when it starts interfering with the foreign direct investment coming in, that's when climate is sacrificable. So I think the political will exists when it's conveniently it fits the bottom line. So I think that's what I wanted to highlight in terms of political will. And in terms of the non-interference that's also come up here, I think that is something that we as civil society have to reckon with continuously, because of the ASEAN principle of non-interference with each other's sovereignty and government. And because of that, sometimes it's difficult to challenge the status quo, because you cannot challenge another country's opinion and sovereignty and their principles. So I think because of that, everything that happens in terms of climate action remains a suggestion and not so much a concrete action. So that's just what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And then some interesting thoughts here, right? The geopolitics is mentioned, fake green policy is mentioned, there's misinformation that is mentioned, someone mentions capitalism. And I think I saw Crazy Rich Asians I thought that was the movie on this, right? There was a movie or something on this. But anyway, these are interesting reflections. So let's start with Khan now.
I won't pick on that. I mean, and that would be it may be something I will talk later in other panels. But let's start with the question itself, ASEAN. Because of, ASEAN doesn't exist. What do I mean by that? I mean, ASEAN as an institution, even us sitting in the body, it's not ASEAN. It's a leader's will. It's a leader's will. So what do I mean by that? Meaning that, ASEAN, to get everything to be whatever, you have to have declarations. Right? I mean, and those declarations, what are they? They are the political will of the leaders, basically. And different time, different things happens, right? And because of that, I think it links back directly two things here, non-interference and political will. Number one, on non-interference, I think it's really important because of when it comes to climate issues, it no longer bounded in one single boundaries anymore. It's a transnational human rights issues. I bring you to northern Thailand. So now we have one of the serious problems that's happening, which is the water contaminations in the Kok and Sai River. And these borders, now the water is going already into the Mekong River. And if we continue keeping saying that, well, we're going to do bilateral, we're not going to solve the problem because of eventually this water is shared by how many countries already. So at the end of the day, it has to be a collective willing of all the leaders to come together. But again, to have a gut to have that conversation and say that this is a serious problem, it really needed, political will again. So that's why it linked all these two things together. So I really hope that for my own government, the new government that come in will look into and take a serious look into this. And I would ask all of you here in these rooms to also pressure the governments related as well on this particular issue, because it's not going to be a small issue. It's going to be a really big issue that's coming up very soon. And Masai in particular is a city is already affected, not just one issue. It's when you talk of climate, right now, water contaminations there, transboundary haze is there, flooded, mudslides, and some other thing, and earthquake also, right? So 5 disasters in one city. So in that sense, I think it's something that political will, it needs to go beyond that level of political will already. And last but not least, I tap onto one thing on informations. I think this one is really important because I went to one of the hearing together with the people in the North when it comes to this issue also. Sometimes the lack of enough information, it makes people scared and not knowing what's actually really happened. So because of that, the transparency is in terms of the information to let people know it's actually beneficial to the government for them to be able to support and actually take actions together with the government as well. So rather than seeing it as a contrast between the government and the people, I think it's really important there to actually have more information available to people on the ground.
And I would say accurate information, right? Because there's also a risk of greenwashing and fake news and fake information. So that is also emerging very fast. And I think you mentioned about political will, and I think that's where the one element of the ICJ advisory opinion is that states have a binding obligation to cooperate. So I think the collaboration is crucial. So, and I think you have a role to play. All of us have a role to play to change that political will, right? I think that is a key issue to consider. Edmund.
Well, I'm not going to be politically correct. I think there's a lot of these points here that are very valid. For me, at ASEAN as an association, right, with Timor-Leste in October, not Southeast Asia, right, if we look at it. But the point I think I want to make is that we don't have enough of the elite and those in power who feel the impact of the environment, the negative impacts of the environment. So the earthquakes, the natural disasters are always affecting the most vulnerable. They're always affecting the groups that are relying on the land for their livelihood. And those in power just live in big mansions and are insulated from the feeling. And a lot of us are also very lucky, right? We are in a situation that we are very privileged to be safe from a lot of these disasters. But I think when you have those in power seeing the haze, feeling the haze in Malaysia, in Jakarta, in Singapore, when you have those in power who have loved ones who die, touch wood, like we don't want that, but when they feel it, then they say, yeah, okay, let's do something about it.
Thank you, Edmund, for that. Very candid reflections. Joanne, how do you react to what you see here?
Yeah, I mean,
and is it different from what you know in your work on the ground?
Yeah, I think we need to reflect what's the main driver of climate change in the region. So how do we address that, right? And if we look at the region, we're actually rich in tropical forest. And who are the ones destroying the forest? Are they made accountable? So we need a strong accountability mechanism and regulatory framework to regulate those that are polluting, destroying. Because otherwise, that's also where it's linked to political will. Because if there's no political will to have strong regulatory framework, to what I can say here on corporate capture, they will just continue to drive agribusiness on forest, even mining that are not regulated. I mean, these are the ones that are contributing, and yet they are not being addressed. So the actions are needed, and I do agree that we also need to provide the necessary support to those in the front line, those that are suffering from the impact of climate change, and yet they don't get any support. They're the ones indigenous peoples are the ones protecting the environment. We're in the front line of the impact. And the solution provided is again impacting on us. So it's all these layers of jeopardy, and yet the necessary legal and policy framework and enforcement are not there. So I can reflect that it's really a combination of lack of political will, regulatory framework, and strong accountability. I think we really need to hammer on accountability, because if we just allow polluters to continue, forest destroyers to continue, mining to continue without accountability, we will not be able to take effective action on climate.
Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of accountability. And I think somehow accountability does not feature very prominently in this map, right? Which is bit of a surprise, right? Like access to remediation aspect. But anyway, so we will now move discussion to the next level, and may I request the next question to be flashed. And the next question is, we are trying to understand that what should be done differently by companies or governments, states in this ASEAN region. That is the next question. Because ultimately, in the ICJ advisory opinion as well, the court mentions several general principles, and sustainable development is one of those principles. Inter-American Court of Human Rights also highlights that we need to have a transformative idea of development, so we cannot ignore development, but the development has to be sustainable in the real sense, in practice, as Georgie was trying to underscore, not on paper, but in practice, it has to really mean that. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to invite interventions from the floor. So some of you have participated in this question as part of this, but now is your turn to also articulate this one word into a couple of sentences. So what should change on the ground to turn from paper to practice, or what is already happening, which is indicating good practices? So the floor is open. You can identify yourself, who you are, from which organization, and try to be brief. 1 minute each is ideal, but so that I can take many interventions. Yes, please, so start here. Please raise your hands. Who next?
Good afternoon. I'm JB Carganera from the Philippines, from an environmental network. I think it's very important that states pass more and stronger transparency and accountability laws. And at the same time, we need to capacitate communities and citizens to be more active in governance and public administration.
Thank you. And now accountability is here. So I don't know if it was triggered by my remarks or people were reflecting about that absence of accountability on the previous word map. But okay, we'll take second. Yes.
I'm Ashok from India. My organization, Minds, Middle and People. I strongly believe that community participation at all level, from micro to macro level, and also influence to policy level. And most important, that carbon credit, everyone is talking about carbon credit, but there is no such a roadmap. So there should be a proper roadmap consultation, propose affected community, sit with them and made a plan. And in most of the area, particularly that disaster, the same area, earthquake zone area, same cyclone, same typhoon, same arid and semi-arid zone. And where there are so many infrastructure and petrochemicals industry are, established. So there should be a proper participation of community from micro to macro level. Another thing, must to brainstorming a policy maker in participatory way. Thank you.
Okay, so participation is somewhere, but it's not coming out very prominently on this word cloud, but your point is well taken. So we'll take more interventions. And can you raise your hands? Who else would like to, in the first row, anyone else? I will get this lady, and then after that we go to the second row. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Surti from Indonesia. I have a question. As we are here in this forum, what is the implication of these declarations regarding the corporate accountability? Thank you.
Maybe my question back to you is, what would you like to have? Because that is what we want, solutions coming from not just the panelists, but the solutions, because there's a lot of experiences and expertise in the room. So we are collectively thinking and trying to come up with some solutions that what needs to be changed in ASEAN. And this is a case study. If we find some concrete 5 things that must be done differently here by governments or companies, then we can apply that in other parts of Asia as well. So if you had a wish list, what is one thing you will like to change in terms of accountability of businesses coming out of these declarations or advisory opinion or anything else? Sorry, that is not a good way to answer the question, but thank you. Or you want to respond now? Because you have to answer your own question. That what would you like to have? Okay, so you think about it. I'll come back to you. Think about it. Okay, so now let's go to the second row. Okay, we'll start here. And then please raise your hands. I'm going to come to the second row, and then no one is going to be hiding anywhere. So I'm going to come at the end as well. So no one will be left behind. Everyone has to participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Surya. You said a wish list that ASEAN should do. And for me, the wish list would be consultation and coordination between states and businesses. And for a concrete example, I would have the Dindigul Agreement, which is in the apparel sector in the south of India, where the businesses have formed an association. They're working with the governments who are also working with the trade organizations. And there is actual meaningful stakeholder engagement. So we keep saying in the business and human rights world, meaningful stakeholder engagement. But I think if we were to look at a concrete example that's already happening within Asia, I would say that would be one example that ASEAN should also implement, an actual coordination between states, businesses, organizations, communities at the grassroots on what can be done better.
Thank you, and I can't agree more, because climate change will require collaboration and coordination and cooperation. So thank you for raising that point. We'll move to the second row. Any new hands in the second row? I'll come to the first row in a second, sorry. Second row, second row, second row. I'm bidding here, second row. No one in the second row? So let's go the third. Anyone in the third row? Oh. So in my classroom, people used to sit behind, right? So I'm not going to ask questions. So who is in third row? No one is willing? Okay, then we go to the first row. So the first row, yes. We'll start here and then continue. Yes, please. We'll come to you.
Thank you. Back to the comment on the definition of development, and that too often it's only economic development, GDP growth. One thing on the wish list would be to have other criteria to define, like in terms of measurement of development, not just basing, not just using the GDP, but other criteria like well-being, restoration of nature, to make sure that when you are developing, you are taking into account also not just the pure economic part, but also the people and the nature. Thank you.
Good point. That's where the UN Secretary General last year did issue a policy brief, and it was beyond GDP growth, right? So I think that's where the focus is, and we're talking about the degrowth and all those particular ideas, and how do we make the economies more sustainable and inclusive? Because in future, it is quite possible that not everyone will have work. We're talking about 5 days, 6 days a week, but in future we might have 3 days a week because there are not enough jobs. So people just can relax and eat a tablet every day. That will be their food, and somehow they need to be supported. And hopefully TikTok and Insta will be there, so you can just have a good life. But let's move on a more serious note to the next, please.
Thank you, Surya Deva. And also introducing this new convening of the session. I think...
Did you like the format?
Sorry?
Did you like the format of the session?
I think it's good ensuring a participation from
Thank
the floor as well.
Please introduce yourself. Thank you.
This is Frederick from Malaysia, also working with the ASEAN Indigenous Peoples SPEC. I think try to contribute in this discussion. One thing is if we have wish, one of the things that we have faced in ASEAN is a non-interference approach. So how we can work around this non-interference? I think this is an important question for us. For example, if Malaysia have a problem, but other country wanted to help, for example, but they cannot talk on behalf of Malaysia, for example, right? I think this is a big challenge for us to work around this ASEAN level. And I think the important to see the balance or ensuring the 3P, for example, people's, planet, and profit. Not only we see everything about the profit or money, let's say the indigenous people land. What you see is all about money, commodity, right? And profit. I think we need to equalize this. How this 3P is important to work together, and that really ASEAN we can achieve a better future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the reminder, and I think one potential solution could be the cooperation, collaboration element, right? Because if the states decide to collaborate, then they may not see this as interference. That's my feeling. I don't know, you may correct me, Edmund. And so I think strengthening that cooperation, collaboration could be relevant. So let's move on. Okay, so the first row is really very active. Huh? All right. One more, yes. We'll start with Jihan, and then we move on to this side.
Thank you, Professor. Just two quick ones. I'm Jehan from UNDP Malaysia. So climate change is an inherently intergenerational issue. So I think one thing for businesses to do is to create intergenerational equity by hiring young people. And I think they need to do this quickly and in big numbers. And for states, especially in ASEAN, I think it's important for them to enable conditions that allow for climate justice litigation. I think that's still pretty new. I think we have lots of issues related to SLAP, but not enough remedies and mediation channels to be able to allow communities, indigenous communities, local communities to have more legal representation. Over.
Thank you very much. We move on. Thank you. Yes, please. You have the.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia, and I am from an organization called Global Human Rights Center in London. My question, rather, before I go to the question, I believe that the laws on ground should change, so from ground up, so changing of the laws. But I also think that there is a lot of policy papers, advisory opinions that come up every single year. And I'm a lawyer by training, so I know this. So my question is, how can we move from paper to practice? What do we do? And then thinking about this session, and I was wondering how the thoughts behind the session, and what are we, I think that's one of the things she was also trying to point out. After the session, what would be the impact or the output from the session? Would the contributions from the audience, would that make a policy paper? Would that make a research paper? Would that be a publication? And what was the thought going into this session? Are we trying to find a synergy between the right to healthy and sustainable environment and the right to sustainable development. Is that what the thought process was behind the session?
All right, yes, partly that was the idea, because while talking to stakeholders on the ground, we hear, and I think Georgie highlighted it, the difference between paper and practice. So normatively, the conflict is not serious, but practice, the conflict is serious. And in our view, the co-organizers, we feel that unless we resolve that conflict, we will not be addressing the root causes. And I think from where we hopefully will develop something together, that is the idea. So maybe some concrete takeaways from this session, but also the normative standards that are already there, the declarations that will come out, the advisory opinions already there. So how do we merge it together? Those normative standards and what is coming out from this particular session, the expertise, the experiences of people from different parts of the world. But thank you for asking that question, that what is the purpose of this session? Let's move on. Yes, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Wendy from Raoul Wallenberg Institute. I just actually want to flag one of the answers from the previous slide about barriers. Someone's actually answered ASEAN in itself is a barrier, which I think very insightful answer. For me, looking at ASEAN, you have to see ASEAN as an institution, but also individual member states, because ASEAN will not do what the member states want to do. So if you want to change anything at ASEAN, change the member states first, or do it in parallel. More work for everyone, but I think that's the way it should go. It could go both ways, but I think if you want to do it parallel, that's one way to go. The classic answers of what needs to do first: capacity building, participatory policy development, close the implementation gap, as Georgie mentioned earlier. That's all needs to be done at both levels, at national and regional, because it's both as hard. But like, I think there was someone in one of Edmund's workshops on peace in Jakarta saying that exactly what I said earlier, ASEAN will not do what the member states doesn't want to do. So ASEAN is only as strong as the member states are. So if you want, I really encourage everyone to start looking at your national level work and then try to link it the best that you can to any ASEAN frameworks. Because AICHR is not the only entry point, it's one among many. Maybe they are the most open, yes, to some extent, but there are others. So really try to do that. And then, and now we have Timor-Leste. We have to support them as well. And then they might actually be a breath of fresh air. Who knows? So yeah, that's just a little bit of a reflection from my side. Thanks.
ASEAN as part of the problem. So maybe that could be said about almost anyone. United Nations as part of the problem, right? So, or any institution for that matter. So I think what we're trying to highlight here is that how that institution and the power of that institution can be harnessed in a positive way. Nothing is perfect, but despite all these limitations and challenges, how we can leverage the collective will of ASEAN coming together, because one country alone cannot solve the climate change issue that we're dealing with. Now I see more interest from the back benches. I'll come to you in a second, but let me give the floor to gentleman there. If you can try to grab the microphone. Yes, please. Introduce yourself and
thank you. I'm Zubair Turwani from a country, from an area which has been constantly a victim of climate change-induced flooding. I mean, northern Pakistan and northern India, the same. So as for, I don't know whether my country, Pakistan, is a part of ASEAN or not. Maybe
not yet.
Yeah, maybe not. But ASEAN, we know all the countries here, but Pakistan is a part of Asia, of course. So my question is for the accountability and apathy. Why don't we take the biggest polluters accountable, who are the responsible to destroy the planet Earth? I mean, ASEAN and other such bodies should also think towards that. Otherwise, there is the power is there, the knowledge is there, the everything there. The global North, they are pushing us to the catastrophes.
Very good call to hold the polluters accountable. And if you recall, the ICJ advisory opinion, in fact, very conveniently does not admit polluter pays principle as one of the general principles. And I found that problematic. I don't know how you feel, Georgie, on that, but we'll come back to the people sitting here. But let me take a couple of more interventions, and then I will come back to the panelists, how they want to reflect on what they're hearing or their own thoughts about the solutions, the way forward, going forward. Yes, please, you have the floor now.
Warm Pacific greetings. Andrew from New Zealand. I work for the Asian Development Bank. And I just wanted to tease the panel's appetite for carbon trading, because in New Zealand, we pay countries in Southeast Asia to reduce their carbon footprint. And we do that to kind of avoid our own responsibilities. And so there's quite a lot of that. And it builds quite nicely on the previous question, where countries in the global north pay countries in the global south to avoid their own obligations. And is that something that ASEAN should be exposing more of? What is the role of ASEAN in terms of highlighting the growing levels of inequality between the global north and the global south?
Very good point. And whenever the word trading comes into picture, it raises some interesting questions, because trading is not always human rights or environment friendly. But we'll come to that. Maybe Georgia could reflect on carbon trading, or any other panelist as well. But are there any other interventions? Yes, please.
Thank you so much. I'm Baria. I belong to the International Domestic Worker Federation. One thing I like to just echo on the law implementation. I think the more important is talking about law enforcement and how those people who make more damage to the other people, right? I think this is something that should be accountable to. This is the one, and because many of colleagues are talking about participatory process within the community, as a woman and as a group that got a lot impact from the climate change, the question is now, many of migrant worker, women migrant worker, especially, they are being forced to migrate to other country, which is the other country also do not have kind of systemic protection for women. So meaning to say this woman becoming effect from the multiple damage that company made. So what I'm gonna say in terms of participatory, let's look at how women should be able and should be have a room for more participatory in the sense of claiming the right in the context of climate change. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for highlighting this issue of participatory nature of all the decision-making processes. I could take one more last intervention before I go back to the lead panelist. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to? Yes. Thank you.
I'm also from Raoul Wallenberg Institute, but my question is pretty quick. Just wondering if you're planning to also work on with the ASEAN Green Taxonomy and Sustainable Taxonomy as well, in terms of sustainable development as a plus social criteria.
All right. So there are a couple of questions that came from the participants in the room, but also now I would like to go back to the team sitting with me here. So what are your, the common question that I have for all of you is that what are your main key takeaways? And I think there is a request now coming from the floor that we should compile some of these takeaways, something tangible coming out of the discussion in this room, right? So who wants to start? Based on what you hear on the screen, as well as what you heard in the room, Edmund.
Thank you, Surya, and thank you for all the interventions. I think it's a very good format. I think we should follow this in the near future. I just wanted to make two very quick points as a key takeaway from what we have heard around the table. It's a rich discussion that cannot be captured in an hour. One, I think in the region, in ASEAN, these norms of the right to development, the norms of safe, clean, healthy, sustainable environment are not fixed norms. The meanings are still being contested, and the meanings are still being meanings that have to be played out in practice. So it's meanings in use. Especially the right to clean, safe, healthy environment is something which developed quite recently. The UDHR didn't even have it, but the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration 2012 had it. And then we have the ICJ advisory opinion. We also have this right to development that I think the global north don't really like. So I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room also sometimes. When you speak about, or when we speak about right to development initiatives, you're not going to get donors coming to work on those issues from the north because they perceive it in a different way, and of course we here perceive it in a different way, I think a more people-centric way. So the first point I wanted to make is, and it's a plug for what AICHR is doing, we realize that we need to have some sort of a common baseline in ASEAN, imperfect as it may be, contested norms continuing through these two declarations. One, which we will adopt in October, which is the right to safe, clean, healthy environment. And the second one, which is still currently in progress, which is the one on right to development, but also importantly, linking it to the right to peace. When we started as chair of ASEAN this year, we wanted to try and deal with some sort of a framework, come up with some sort of a template to deal with the conflicts in the region that are occurring. Myanmar, Papua, Myanmar, Southern Thailand, Timor-Leste, Mindanao, and we have had workshops trying to come up with that template. But also the second outcome document that we are trying to get is this document on the right to development and peace towards realizing inclusive and sustainable development. And that's why I appreciate what Surya has done to try and put this together, and also been supporting us on a lot of the workshops at our AICHR level to try and help us refine it. So in the two declarations, you will start to see that there's some language which may or may not sound familiar, and there may be things that are missing, but it shows that these norms will continue to be a discussion, and how we can then use it in the region to ensure that all these good practices and normative positions that we are taking are going to be implemented. But second, I think the message that I keep saying from the first day I've been here is that what I realize is that we need localization of human rights language. Localization of human rights language that doesn't dilute international norms, but it's embedded within our psyche, and it's far more acceptable than the language that is used by the global north. When we use BHR, when we use due diligence, people get very scared. Here, countries and representatives of AICHR get very scared. So when we talk about it in a room in Bangkok, in this forum, people get a bit scared if they come from countries that do not understand that language or don't have that definitions in the language. People are still scared about using the language indigenous people. I'm not asking you to change the language. I'm saying that we need to try and dictionarize, contextualize, localize things which are a bit more easier to accept in the region. I know what I'm saying is controversial, but what I've been seeing for the past few years is that this exercise needs to happen, and there are not enough of that kind of exercises. And I think when Surya mentioned right to development, and we were speaking in the beginning of our chairmanship, chairship, we were talking about business and human rights, and I said, the first question was, how does business and human rights relate to right to development? Right? And we're talking about economic development, but we are not yet even talking about political development, social cultural development, and what was the third one? Fourth one? There's fourth, right?
Cultural, political.
Yeah, that's why we need your brochure. But the point is, for example, I give you two examples. In the conflict workshops, why I keep saying this is in the conflict workshops that we've been having, the word early warning mechanisms is a word that some ASEAN member states are very afraid to use. When we say let's start on early warning mechanisms, they close up. You can't have a conversation in the peace, and the AICHR is a political security pillar. You can't have a conversation when you talk about early warning mechanism. Countries will not have it. But then when you talk about scenario planning, everybody, let's do scenario planning. You know what will happen if there's an earthquake? What will happen if there's a cyclone? What will happen if there are terrorists coming? You know. But when you say, early warning, no such thing. We cannot. But let's think about scenario planning. So in how things just convert in just the different language that's being used. So when the final example is this word accountability. People don't like the word accountability. I'm not even sure, maybe Khan knows, but the two declarations that we have, I don't know whether the word is there. I hope it's there. But if it's not there, I know there's one there that I can remember is on access to justice. So we're going to have access to justice. But accountability. So again, I don't know what other word we can use. And I was trying to list down here as I was hearing your interventions about how indirect and direct protection of human rights and protection of these right to development and environment can work. And listing them down may be an answer to that very chunky, difficult word to accept, accountability. Of course, I'm not saying we don't use the words when we need to name and shame dictators, when we need to name and shame those who violate human rights. But I'm just saying in the conversations, from what I see in the global south, maybe I say global south, Southeast Asia, I see that we cannot just adopt hook, line, and sinker the language of the global north. Thank you.
All right, 2 quick points. Localization is definitely important. And in fact, next week, the focus of the Pacific Forum on BHR is localization of the norms. So I think that is an important point. And I think what, Edmund, you're trying to highlight is what Professor John Ruggie did. Like he tried to pick the terminology in Pillar 2, which businesses are more comfortable with, right? So human rights due diligence is the idea that he borrowed so that the businesses can relate to that. So I think what you're saying is tested and tried before. So we can be principled, the goals are there, but how can we creatively find entry points to reach that goal? Khan?
Just have 3 points. So first point, I'm just going to pick up on what Wendy is mentioning. I think that sovereignty, non-interference, it's not just ASEAN norm, it's a global norm. And it's one of the most successful norms ever exists. And if it's the most successful norm ever exists, it can be learned, it can be unlearned. That means that we can really reintroduce some other new norms. And 3 things I think is really important, that's my takeaway. One is intergenerational one. Second, intersectional one, intersectionalities. And third one, the transnational one. These could be a new norms that we could have set within the region itself and to really have that conversation going. If the state sovereignties, it takes 80 years to actually be established like this, then it would take another 80 years for all these new norms to establish. But we have to be really patient and keep going. That's the first thing. So norm setting remain important. Second thing, when it comes to implementations, I totally agree with Edmund that, the localizations of these different normative ideas and thoughts, it need to be very much active. But how to actually doing that? For me, I feel like, okay, of course, we have to encourage the governments to actually do things more. I did call for government to take more actions, as well as early on during these discussions. But if we cannot go at a national level, we go to other levels. We go to city level, we go to university level, we go to the municipality level. That's why we want to create different champions in different of the areas so that they can be the one that bring changes. And for me, I think that, for example, the concept of human rights city is something that's so important because it really allow us to, bring up new champions to be able to highlight those different kind of things. It's just being creative in that sense as well. So that's the second thing I want to reflect on. And last but not least, what I want to reflect on also is that it's a role of different institutions. Even though I've been very critical of even my own body as well. I mean, when you see here, right? AICHR Thailand, AICHR Malaysia, rather than being commissioner from ASEAN and AICHR, right? So that boundary is, but the thing was that the reason why it's really important is to know who can have that convening power to discuss. And I can ask this room now, how many of you know AICHR before you come in here? Many people would not really know it unless you have some engagement in some form. And ASEAN will not go around and promote it, come and give complaints to these bodies, right? Because this is something that I think is really important that, like how to have different entry points for the conversation to actually get going. It's so important. So that's why I want to echo on some of the point that Winnie was mentioning just now on that.
Thank you very much, Kanan. I think I've mismanaged the time. So if my 3 co-panelists cooperate before someone kicks us out of this room, Georgie, we'll start with you, your reflections. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Surya. I wanted to take it back to the overall title of this session, From Paper to Practice. And to me, one of the things that we've heard, and the flip side of accountability, and I'm so glad that one of the people at the back of the room brought this up, the flip side to accountability is enforcement. And we have to have, in order to move from paper to practice, we have to have robust enforcement across the enforcement chain. And when people have spoken about public participation, we need to have the ability for citizens to identify non-compliance and report it, and to work together with enforcement officials all the way through to the court systems. We need to have accessible, impartial and knowledgeable judges, ideally green benches, who can adjudicate environmental matters, who can provide that access to environmental justice. I think that is one of the key steps that we need in order to actually start getting the achievement of the climate goals and other goals that we have. The other point that I wanted to touch on was carbon trading. Andrew, thank you very much. And I point you to a very good publication that the Asian Development Bank has just released in July of this year, which has looked at blueprints for developing and regulating carbon markets. But it's very important question. We have to look at the issues of safeguards, of recognition of Indigenous peoples' rights, of looking at the need for independent oversight mechanisms. So we don't have time to delve into the complexity of all of it, but just responding to that quickly. So those would be my two quick takeaways.
Thank you very much for being precise but very specific in terms of where we should be going, Georgie. Much appreciated. Pratna.
I think
With Pratna to you being precise.
Yes. So no, I think my question is more of a philosophical question, whether this kind of consumption, this kind of production is actually conducive to development. And I think that brings up the more like moral imperative around degrowth and how much is too much. So I think we're trying to be within our framework of continuing to consume more, continuing to produce more, continuing to exploit more, but still trying to save the environment. But at what point do we say that we don't need more electric cars, we don't need more mining, we don't need more extractivism, and then just challenge the notion of growth in itself and take on individual responsibility and introspect on the role that we play in perpetuating this system. So I think I would just like to challenge that as the starting point of how these discussions move forward, because at the rate we are going, we cannot save the climate without like sacrificing some of our principles and our ideals. So I'll be precise, that's it.
Thank you so much. That's very powerful. Thank you for reminding us that we need to challenge the fundamental roots of the crisis. Joanne, you have the last words. Thank you.
I just want to reflect on the last question on what one thing that states and companies, and reflecting on the response, I think I have a simple response to that question, and it is for states and companies to listen to its citizens, especially the rights holders and the marginalized sectors, and take action to what they're saying. And that is what we mean by putting people at the center. And if that shift will not happen, we will always be, the states will always be taking the advice from companies, from rich countries, will be drawn by all rules on trade and liberalization of our economy, and not putting into question what has been said about consumerism and all that. So that's one. And the other one is the need for policy coherence and enforcement. Policy coherence on the protection of environment and respect for human rights and protection of human rights. That should be the center. Because what's happening now is that laws on mining, laws on agribusiness are the ones being implemented, and not the ones on environment protection and on human rights. So unless we put that at the center, then the system will still continue to be like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the panelists. A round of applause for them, but also for all of you for participating in the discussion and contributing to some key takeaways or recommendations that could be compiled and then published as kind of recommendations for ASEAN going forward. So thank you for contributing to that. As I mentioned, if anyone would like to take this leaflet, that how we should understand right to development, the copy is available. We are also translating into local languages, so you should be able to grab digital versions as well. So thank you everyone for participating, and let's continue working together. Thank you.